This World Insight, I'm Tian Wei. Still to come in the program, a mad scramble for COVID vaccines. Who gets what vaccine, when, where, and how? Answers from the head of CEPI, one of the most important organizations on vaccines in the world. Coming up right next.
Our goal in Covax is to deliver more than 2 billion doses of vaccine to countries.
This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. We have the vaccines now, but the big question is who gets them? Experts tell us nobody is safe until everyone is safe, yet rich countries are scrambling over limited supplies, which less affluent nations are left out in the cold. Several international organizations have been working so hard to fix this inequality, and one of them is CEPI, otherwise known as the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Together with WHO and the Gavi Vaccine Alliance, they aim to inoculate 20% of poor countries through the Covax platform. So far, 2 billion doses have been secured, and delivery is expected to take place soon. For more on that progress, I had the chance to talk to Richard Hatchett, who is the CEPI CEO. That's the interview that I've been pursuing over the past year since the last World Economic Forum in Davos. Take a listen. And now joining us, Richard Hatchett, CEO of Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, or CEPI. It was last time, almost the same month and the same day that we talked to one another. Richard, tell me more about how much availability are the COVID vaccines available to the developing world?
Our goal in Covax is to deliver more than 2 billion doses of vaccine to countries that need it in the coming year. And this will principally be developed countries in the developing world, of course. Our first vaccine shipments, we believe, will go out this month. And we are on track, we believe, to deliver close to 500 million doses of vaccine in the first 6 months of 2021 and over 2 billion by the end of the year.
Wow, that's a grand goal, I have to say, given now all the debates about vaccine nationalism. What are some of the biggest challenges for you now?
Different vaccines have, are being presented in different vials. They have different requirements. Some of the vaccines have to be mixed with what are called adjuvants at the bedside, essentially before the vaccine can be given, or in the clinic before the vaccine can be given. Some of the vaccines require it as storage at minus 70 degrees Celsius, others at minus 20 degrees Celsius, others can be stored in the refrigerator, and it differs from vaccine to vaccine. So a country needs to know how much vaccine it is receiving, when it will receive it, what kinds of vaccines it receives. It needs to be able to train those who will be administering the vaccines. Some countries are choosing to deliver vaccines through vaccine centers. Others might choose to distribute those vaccines out to hospitals and clinics. And all of that has to be planned for if the delivery and then the dispensing of the vaccine is to be conducted very smoothly and without delay. What we don't want, obviously, is for vaccine to be shipped to a country and then to sit in a warehouse and not used.
On the other hand, Dr. Hatchett, how much a variety do we really need about the vaccine against the COVID-19? Some wonder whether it's better to put all the resources on some of the best options that we already got. Earlier, I talked to George Gao, the director of China CDC, and he was telling me there should be as many variety as possible so that we could have the best choice, and people should have their liberty in choosing. What is your take?
Pandemic is a threat everywhere in the world, and we need to be able to protect, all segments of all populations in all countries. To do that, we're going to need a variety of vaccines. Some of the vaccines, as we mentioned, might be hard to use in some locations just because of the storage requirements. Others might be especially effective in the older population, which is at greatest risk of severe illness and death. And so we do need a variety of vaccines. We also need a lot of vaccine. We're trying to deliver vaccine essentially to ultimately to perhaps, many billions of people, maybe 7 billion people. And to do that, we need to increase manufacturing capacity. And right now, having many manufacturers manufacturing as much as they can is going to be the quickest way to deliver the volumes that we need.
But should there be a quote-unquote universal vaccine? Is that a better way? What does it take to have quote-unquote a universal vaccine?
Well, people are beginning to talk about that. I mean, coronaviruses, not just COVID-19, but SARS and MERS. We know that coronaviruses are a threat. In fact, some people now think that a coronavirus actually caused a pandemic back in the 1890s. And we know from, we've done what is called bioprospecting. We've gone out and looked for additional viruses. We know that there are at least an additional 150 coronaviruses out in the world that we haven't experienced as humans yet. So there is a discussion beginning. I think people are very interested. Can we develop a vaccine that protects broadly against a number of coronaviruses, not just COVID-19, not this strain of COVID-19 or that strain of COVID-19, but broadly? And that's actually an initiative that we'll be undertaking in the coming year to start research on that as well.
Have we seen earlier examples, successful examples against the other kinds of virus?
Well, there's been a lot of work that has been undertaken on influenza. We have a number of influenza strains that circulate, and periodically a new influenza strain will emerge and cause a pandemic. And there have been discussions about broadly protective or even so-called universal flu vaccines. We don't have one yet, but a number of groups are working and think they have leads and think this may be technically possible. And I think bringing that idea of striving to create ideally a universal coronavirus vaccine is one that we should pursue, because they do represent a threat, and we can't say with any certainty when the next one would emerge or even how lethal it would be. I think it's important to remember that the current coronavirus has a fatality rate below 1%, but other coronaviruses like SARS have higher fatality rates.
You were, at the time when you were working in the U.S. government, you were very much involved in the support toward China fighting against the SARS. Dr. Hatchett, are you still surprised at what happened to SARS at the end of the day? It just disappeared. Do we learn much about what really happened? Would that be some interesting information for us now?
We were able essentially to contain SARS and prevent it from spreading globally. Now the reason we were able to do that with SARS is that it behaved differently than COVID. With COVID, we know that a lot of people become sick, but may not have, or become infected rather,
right,
but may not have symptoms, but can still transmit the disease. And it's a very highly transmissible disease. SARS is less transmissible, and only people who become sick are able to transmit disease. And that's why we were able to contain it. But we're not able to do so with COVID, unfortunately.
And we still do not know how it could just disappear.
SARS emerged, and it spread very rapidly, and then ultimately that outbreak was contained. My memory is that I believe there were a couple of additional cases the following year, but they didn't result in large outbreaks, and then it has never reemerged. And why that happened, we don't know. Could it happen again? There's no reason to think that it couldn't. And as I said, we do know that there are many coronaviruses that are out circulating in animal populations.
Right.
And I think we need to be globally prepared to respond in the future. And one way to do that, of course, would be to have a universal vaccine, if that's even possible. But if it's not possible, there are many other ways that we can increase our preparedness.
On the one hand, Dr. Hatchett, you see people are looking forward to having vaccines or being vaccinated. There has been a shortage of vaccine for those who really want to do it. However, on the other hand, there are also a huge group in the world that do not believe in vaccines, and they think their lives is being threatened and scientists might talk nonsense. How do you see this huge divide of the world, apparently, even about one issue of vaccine?
I think it's a very complex problem. I do think, when you're in a pandemic, the disease that the vaccine can prevent is visible to everyone. The threat of the disease is visible to everyone. And I would hope that that would be an incentive for many people who might be hesitant, at least hesitant initially to get vaccines, when they see that millions of people are being vaccinated, that the vaccines are safe, and that they protect people from a potentially very serious illness. I would hope that most people would see the value for themselves in getting the vaccine. And even more to the point, I think getting the vaccine is the one thing that every single individual can do to help beat the pandemic.
Well said.
And if that's important.
There are variants of the virus, and therefore people debate about which vaccine could be more effective regarding the variants and the future variants. Who knows? They say certain type of vaccines could be more effective in terms of adjusting to the virus changes, while others might not be. And yet there were also records, as illustrated by my talk earlier with Georgia Gao from China CDC, even inactivated vaccines could work with adjustment. For example, within 3 months' time to deal with 2009 flu and also EV71. So what should we, how should we choose?
The fact that the virus is circulating so freely around the world in so many people increases the likelihood of the emergence of these new variants that can escape our vaccines and our drugs and our therapeutics and even our diagnostics. And it's one reason it is so critically important that countermeasures and specifically vaccines be shared globally as quickly as possible. If we can reduce the transmission of disease globally, we reduce the likelihood that these variants will emerge. Now, we have very limited data so far about the effectiveness of the vaccines actually being tested in people against the variants. But we have had, just in the last week, some data emerge about the Novavax candidate and the Johnson & Johnson candidate. And fortunately, it shows that the vaccines do work against the new variants, but they work with a lower effectiveness than they worked against the previously circulating strains. And so we do need to be thinking about, do we need to make adjustments to the vaccine? And if we do, how quickly can we make those adjustments?
Exactly.
CEPI is setting a goal that once we make a decision to make an adjustment, we should work with the doctors doing the clinical trials, the regulators, the manufacturers, and be able to get the new vaccine out. Our goal, and this is ambitious, in 100 days.
Wow, that's really something. Even the mRNA vaccine, which is supposed to be more flexible to deal with the variants, we haven't seen any clear data yet. Do we expect anything coming out soon? Earlier, I was talking to the Director General of the IVI International Vaccine Institute, Mr. Jerome Kim. He talked about late February, early March. But what is the likely for you, do you think?
Well, the Pfizer and Moderna have both evaluated their vaccines against against the new virus or a modification of the new virus in laboratory experiments. Yes. What they haven't been able to do yet is collect data from people that they vaccinated, because where they did their trials, these new variants are not circulating. So that will emerge over time. Obviously, both of them have announced publicly that they are making preparations to develop or make the changes in their vaccine that would be necessary to meet the new variants. And that's very encouraging. And I've talked with the CEOs of both Moderna and with Pfizer about their efforts, and that is underway. And I'm glad that it is.
Yeah, you talk about the two earlier vaccines that did test about the variants. They didn't do very well, but they did somewhat. What kinds of vaccines are they, and what kinds of variants are they testing against?
Well, as it happened, Johnson & Johnson, which is making a vaccine that's called a viral vector vaccine.
Yes.
They're using an adenovirus, which is a cold virus, essentially, to present part of the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is put into this adenovirus and then administered, and that's how it produces an immune response. The other vaccine, Novavax, takes a piece of protein that appears on the SARS-CoV-2 and then uses a different mechanism for presenting that to the immune system. So there are different kinds of different approaches to vaccine development, different categories of vaccine. Both of them happened to conduct clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials in South Africa. And so they were conducting the trial while the new variant spread. And because they were conducting the trial while the new variant spread, they actually were able to collect data with their vaccines in a well-controlled study against the new variant. And the Novavax vaccine showed, both of the vaccines essentially showed effectiveness of in the range of 50 to 60% against the new variant. So it does work, but it doesn't work as well as those vaccines work against other, the older variants that were circulating before.
My final questions, we have seen Covax, such a wonderful procurement and delivery platform in the world about the vaccine being established, and many countries are consistently supporting it. Now the United States, with the new administration, also joins Covax. Meanwhile, we have also seen positive development expressed by both leadership in China and the United States. Their contribution determined to contribute to the global effort against the COVID-19. And both have been talking about collaboration. In fact, it could be with one another. So, Mr. Hatchett, as the CEO of CEPI, and also as someone who worked at the very high level of the US system earlier to deal with some of the biggest pandemic the world has ever seen, what do you think these messages could lead us to? What would you like to see?
Well, I think it's tremendously important for the world and for Covax that both China and the United States have expressed their support. The leadership that China and the United States can provide, the vaccines that they can contribute to the overall effort, will be a very important part of the global response. And the solidarity, obviously there are tensions, between the countries, but the solidarity that they can show through a common effort against this virus, which is a threat to all humanity, and to do that through a mechanism like Covax, in which all countries, almost all countries in the world, have joined together to fight the pandemic. I think that's just extremely important, and we welcome it. We're very excited to have both China and the United States now supporting Covax.
Richard Hatchett, CEO of CEPI. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.